Welcome to another episode of This Week with Sabir. In today's hot seat is a dear friend of mine, Zubin Mowlavi. I'll tell you more about him. First of all, I want to thank him for having me on his show, Coffee and Commerce, twice already, where we took a rapid fire questions from the audience, and between me and him, we jammed so well. And I want to publicly say thank you for having me on your show. And this is our return, but ours is not going to be based on questions. We're going to be talking about your journey, and it has been a phenomenal journey with Lucid Fusion and what you have done. So before we get started there, let me tell you about Zubin. He's the president of VaynerCommerce, and he has built a career helping brands build and grow their direct-to-consumer interactions. His professional journey started in 2000 when he co-founded Lucid Fusion, a digital agency that would later become one of the leading global e-commerce solutions provider. Now in 2020, I don't think anything happened that year. No. But in 2020, the most important thing in Zubin's life was he met Gary Vaynerchuk, and he partnered up to form VaynerCommerce following the acquisition of Lucid Fusion. He's a graduate of UC Irvine's School of Computer Engineering. Zubin has combined his passion for technology and music. I see a lot of music behind you there, Zubin, and human interaction in his professional endeavors. Zubin resides in Southern California with his wife and a beautiful son. Zubin, welcome to the show.
Sabir, thanks for having me. I just want to clarify one thing. While meeting Gary was a pivotal moment in my life, it probably wasn't the best thing that ever happened to me. Probably meeting my wife and having my son was, but I love Gary dearly, and it has absolutely been an amazing journey.
So before we get started about the professional Zubin, I would like to know, who is Zubin? Let's start there before we start the journey.
That's a great question. I can give you, we can take the entire hour show and you can analyze me and help me figure that out, to be quite honest with you. But
listen to me, my friend. There are more qualified people than I am that get paid on the hourly to listen to those things. We will talk about the personal to people so that people get to know you more.
Awesome. I think the personal me, ever since I was a child, I was ambitious. I have moved to America when I was 6 years old from Iran. Went to live in Champaign, Illinois, with my parents and my sister. My mom was pursuing her PhD there. So we moved there, lived there for a number of years through senior year of high school, then moved to Southern California. Still have dear friends and that I met growing up in Champaign that I still keep in touch with. Big fan of the University of Illinois. In terms of who I am, I think I've always been incredibly ambitious. I've always wanted to do what the non-linear path, if you will, right? Like, while also kind of holding on to that linear path, meaning even my journey getting started, I went to get my degree in computer engineering at UC Irvine, and I was working at my uncle's print shop in Laguna Beach, Laguna Digital. And even while I was going to school, which I value dearly, I was also wanting to start a business and trying to do that. So trying to take the kind of unconventional route while not fully letting go of the conventional. I think that's perhaps one way to kind of sum up who I am.
I mean, I'm very familiar with kind of that culture also myself. Like, you're kind of boxed into being one of the three people. What are those three?
Exactly.
A doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer. Those
Precisely.
three.
Precisely. So I chose the engineering route. Never really did it, but still felt like it was, to your point, you get boxed in familially in terms of culturally, but at the same time, I think because you grow up in an environment that values education, you also end up valuing it yourself. And so for me, it was a matter of, okay, I want to get my degree because I need to get my degree because it gives me some self-worth. But I can't really tell you that I've used a lot of that or much of that education in what I did afterwards or what I'm doing now.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand. Like, I went through a similar to your career path too. I was a computer science grad from Queens College, and but my first 10 years was very much hardcore engineering. But then I pivoted completely to running businesses and marketing, and that's what I've been doing for the past 25 years now. For a long time. I'm showing my age now. Don't add up those numbers.
Started early. But look, that engineering background in my, well, first of all, I think people gravitate towards engineering that have a certain kind of way of thinking, way of processing
Problem
information.
solving.
Exactly. And so that framework, the way you logically, the systems thinking and whatnot that you deployed in your earlier years is what you're probably deploying now, helping companies as well.
Yep, definitely. I mean, that's from my perspective. It's all math and it's all problem solving,
100%.
and anything that tests my brain into doing that. That's what I love doing. I mean, it doesn't matter what the activity is. That's how I see it. Now, if we fast forward to you're out of UC Irvine, right? What do you start doing right after that?
So I'm actually in it at the time. So this is freshman year, going to UC Irvine, which at the time was pretty much a commuter school. I don't know if it still is. And I keep in close touch with the campus. I'm involved with the campus. But back then, basically, people would like commute in and out. And so that's what I did. I'd go to work several times a week at my uncle's store. And then I would go to school. And then what ended up happening is this is in 1999, 2000. I was really interested in Adobe Photoshop, Dreamweaver, Flash had just come out. And so I'd actually downloaded the trial version of Flash from Adobe. Oh, it was actually Macromedia back then. And then incidentally, people kept coming into his store asking for websites, asking for Flash animations, asking for those sorts of things. I remember the first client that came in, it was called Asbury Environmental Services. So I think they do like recycling for cities, municipalities. And they had some board meeting. And she's like, I want something like flashy. And I'm like, oh, I can do this. So downloaded the trial version of Macromedia Flash and then ended up building something, like learning how to use the tools and building something. And then I went to my uncle and I said, look, we should start a company building websites. And he was very supportive of me, as he still is. And he said, look, if this is what you want to do, let's do it. And so at that point, I'm like, okay. And for me, just to be very clear, at the time, and I think there are a lot of people who, regardless of age, you end up doing things based on perception and a heightened perception of what you will look like, you will appear like by doing it versus doing it for the sake of doing it. Now, I was very passionate about it. I loved Flash. I attended the Macromedia conferences. Like I was deep into it. But at the same time, for me, it was like, oh, this is cool because I'm going to be in school and I'm going to be unique because I'm going to be starting a business. No one else in school is starting a business. So I'm like, oh, I've got kind of a leg up, if you will. So started that. First few years were, at the time, a disaster because I didn't know how to run a business. I didn't even know what P&Ls were. We had a couple of people that were helping out. There was a gentleman who was helping me with business development. And basically, we were trying to figure it out. But at the same time, when you're that young, and it's not really about age, you're that inexperienced, let's put it that way. You don't know how to run a business. You don't really know how to do the work professionally, but you're ambitious and you're excited. And so people kind of gravitate towards that energy, around that energy, and tried to help me with it. But it really wasn't going anywhere. So it was at a point where it's like, now I'm in my senior year. I'm about to graduate. And I had a family friend that I confided in, Zainab Azadia, who I convinced her to come on board and help me build this as a full service digital agency. Her background was in PR and marketing. And she was certainly more experienced work-wise and had a different maturity and skill set than I did. And so she came on board to help me properly build Lucid Fusion into a full service agency.
So so Lucid Fusion was built out during your freshman year. That's when you started doing it.
Yeah.
And then 3 years after that, while you were in college, you start building it. Exactly. So now you graduate. How do you balance that, by the way? I always talk about work-life balance. How do you balance college study, computer engineering, which is a lot of math and physics and computer science, right? And you have this whole other thing that you're building that you have no clue how to run a business, just like you said.
So I'll tell you, you would have to ask somebody else how to manage that because, and in full disclosure for your audience only, and I've never publicly discussed this, not that it matters, but my GPA at UC Irvine was 2.65. I barely graduated from the School of Computer Engineering. Now, the School of Computer Engineering knew that right now. With my involvement, they probably wouldn't ask me to be involved. But
Zubin,
just so you know.
Gary V got an A in gym. The rest of it was all C's and D's.
I mean, look,
So it's
but,
okay.
but to be clear, in high school, straight A student, right? Like that was my focus, and we'll get to focus in a bit. But in terms of work-life balance or school-work balance, I'm absolutely the wrong person to ask about that, because what ended up happening, and I can see this now in retrospect based on where I am in my life, but there was no balance. And the reality is that if I had focused on either of those two, I'm sure it would have been a different experience and I would have been able to go deeper than what I did. And so kind of both of them were kind of didn't get the amount of attention that they deserved, if you will.
Got it. Now, one way or another, with a GPA of 2.67, right? You're done with school. You get your degree. Now you're 100% focused on Lucid Fusion. Did anything else come up during that period besides Lucid Fusion?
During that time, did anything else come up? I mean, there were, for me, and up until I'd say probably the last few years, and we'll get into it and why, but up in the last few years, like I was very easily distracted. And so there were always things that came up. I had a few friends from 2000. So just to time frame everything, graduate or start university 99, 2000, and then graduate in 2004. And in that period of time, I've got Lucid Fusion. And at the same time, with a few friends, we started recording music. And that started actually doing well. We were doing electronic dance music, specifically trance music. And that was going well in a sense that the music we were recording was getting a lot of plays by different DJs. We were asked to perform here and there. And so it was like this moment where I had like three things going on in my life. I had my music, I had my work in Lucid Fusion, and I had school. And then it basically all came together where it's like, okay, now you're graduating. What are you going to do? And again, in consultation with Zainab, we're like, let's just build this into let's give it this Lucid Fusion thing, the attention that it deserves, the focus that it deserves, to see if we can actually turn this into something. And it was quite ironic because the first major account that we got was a traditional advertising account. So if you can imagine, for the first 4 years, all I've done is digital. And then talk about chasing bad revenue. We ended up getting an account that was larger than anything else we've gotten. Like everything we were doing at the time was probably like $10,000 site builds, $15,000 site builds, no really recurring revenue model, nothing that was consistent. So 1 month you'd be super busy, and then you start staffing people. And then the first major account you get that's like a 7-figure deal ends up being traditional advertising, where you're literally designing print ads, which we were super excited about at the time. Come to think of it, 2 years later, it was absolutely the wrong move to make, because we went in a direction that was basically stale and going down. And we were well early with the digital side of things, but it is what it is.
I mean, so what's the advice there? Like, I mean, I think every entrepreneur kind of, at that stage, I would call it an entrepreneurial phase, right? That faces that issue, right? They're laser focused on their product. It's like edgy, it's really interesting and stuff. And then money shows up from a place that's not on your roadmap. Like you said, you were a digital agency and you were given a print ad to work on as a campaign, and money was good.
You know what it is? I think that for a long time, my goal at Lucid Fusion was to grow Lucid Fusion, but the financial goal really was, let's make sure we have enough revenue to be able to maintain and grow the staff that we have, and give ourselves a 6-month to a year runway, so that when we hit 6 months runway in terms of booked revenue with the staff we have and our projected new hires, we were good. Now, come to think of it, after and going through the transition of selling the agency and then moving into VaynerCommerce, you come to realize, which is probably obvious to a lot of people, and I hope it is that you have to actually have business outcomes in mind and goals that you want to reach and goals that you want to achieve, so that when you look at opportunities that come to you, you understand, this is my North Star. This is where I'm headed. Is this going to derail me and head me in a different direction? Or is it going to help accelerate or at least keep me on my path? Same goes for agencies. Same goes with direct-to-consumer brands that we work with. Basically any business, right? And I think that's the big challenge as an entrepreneur, especially when you're starting out, especially to your point, when you have this kind of vision of what you want to do, you're super excited about it, and you set out to do it, and then you realize that maybe it's not going as fast as you want it to go, or you're not getting enough traction, and yet you get traction in a completely different direction that kind of throws you completely for a loop, and then you end up doing it because of that revenue, but it's not getting you to where you want to head to. In my case, primarily because I didn't know where I was going. I was just on this road and I wanted to stay on that road.
I mean, there are challenges when you're running a digital agency or a dev shop, right? The technology changes all the time. I'm especially, you're talking about starting the journey in 2000. Over the past 21 years, it's 2021 right now. So in the past 21 years, technology has, let's say in 2000, Google was a baby.
Totally.
Now it's $1 trillion company, right? And technology, you said that you started with Macromedia Flash that turned into Adobe Flash. That also came and died and went away, but it got transformed into other things.
Exactly.
When you were going through over the past 21 years and this huge shifts in technology and even development and how you develop technology changed, how did you stay on top of it to make sure it wasn't just about Zubin, right? It was Lucid Fusion as a company and as an agency, whether it was 5 people or 50 people, they needed to transform also. What were some of those pivotal points in your history?
So I think that to begin with, because the kind of the digital side of the agency was built around my passion for that kind of work, I was very into staying in the know, seeing the latest things, reading the latest trends. Like it's something that I was incredibly passionate about. And so I think by virtue of that, it ended up rubbing off on other people. With that being said, that's fine when you're like 1 to 5 people, maybe even less than 10 people. Then you start growing, and that needs to be kind of a decentralized function, and it needs to be something that everybody is passionate about. We went through different manifestations of this, giving people time on a monthly basis to read and to learn and whatnot. I think ultimately what it really boils down to is, and then we can talk about kind of the milestones that we went through, but I think what it comes down to is making sure that employees are given the opportunity, A, that they're really passionate about the line of work that they're in, and B, that they're given the opportunity to actually spend time to learn and learn in a manner that they understand that it's actually enhancing themselves and they're growing. Once you achieve that, then I think that it makes it a lot easier for everybody to be contributing, as opposed to making sure that it is the CTO's role to make sure that all new technology flows through her or him, you know? And then in terms of like the milestones that we went through, to your point, start with Flash. Flash is growing. Flash is huge. Everybody's on Flash. And yet we've got issues with Internet Explorer. And so the Internet Explorer 6, we've got issues with that. We've got issues with 7, 8. Pretty much every iteration of Internet Explorer ended up being the biggest pain in the ass in terms of like development. From there, we went into PHP. And once we wanted to have like database driven websites, so like dynamic content, dynamic things coming in. From PHP, for some enterprise clients, the first e-commerce thing we actually did, I think it was in 2008, was on ASP.NET Storefront. And then ASP.NET Storefront was basically, we didn't know how to do it. So we had to find a firm that could do like an e-commerce build for us. And so the firm knew ASP.NET Storefront. Then
I remember, by the way, Zubin, I remember the Duamish sample project. I don't know if you remember that project.
100%. And I think I've recently gotten over the nightmares from ASP.NET Storefront. But then from there, I think the big shift, right? Like we're talking about step function growth for us was Magento. And so we had a client that we started working with, Power Balance, in 2009, 10. They were a local Southern California product company, and they were on like one of these just cart systems, if you will, and wanted to move to like a proper e-commerce platform. We had a lot of experience with PHP, and so we implemented Magento for them. And then from there, went to Magento Enterprise, and then built out 17 storefronts in different countries, and then started learning about localization, not just from a language standpoint, currency, context, products, etc. That was a big shift for us. And so we built, and as a dev agency, if you can imagine, because that ended up being our focus, Magento Enterprise was great because it required a lot of dev resources. So we would build these massive implementations for our clients, and then they would have to pay us monthly to just manage and keep the lights on, if you will. And then from there, the story moves into kind of 2015, 14, 15, meeting the folks at Shopify. And that was yet another pivotal moment in kind of the journey of Lucid Fusion.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's sticking with Magento and knowing the pain that a lot of people went through with Magento. Magento was a sweetheart from an open source perspective, right? Then it got acquired, I don't know, a gazillion times by different companies.
Yep.
Behind the scenes, what's going through your mind when every one of those things were happening? Because you didn't have certainty around the roadmap on the product, because you were relying on it in order to provide service and put your clients on it.
100%. So what ended up happening is we first started with Magento Community, to your point. And so that's an open source solution. Our engineers learned it, and then you really have no support. So you're basically reliant on people, literally people in the world that have come across these issues. And with Magento, if anyone out there has ever used Magento, especially back in the day, it was a massive CPU and memory hog. And so as these sites scaled, we would have to literally scale up servers, load balancers to manage those servers, to be able to handle that. So the biggest issue that we always had with Magento was speed and load balancing, and then making sure that when traffic hit, that these sites could stay up. I remember one of the big projects we did on Magento, and we had to scale up quite a bit, was actually for Oru Kayak. And Oru Kayak was a client of ours that was going to be on Shark Tank. And so we built the Magento site. And then I remember being in the office days before, load testing this whole thing and saying, okay, if you get 100,000 visitors, if you get 1 million visitors, can you do this? And so we scaled them up to like 10 web servers, 4 database servers. And then I want to say like the night before the show, and these are the issues that we had. The night before the show, we were testing. Somebody would open up the site, go add something to cart. They would refresh. The cart was gone. It was in someone else's cart now. And so like there were multiple session issues. Like this is the night before Shark Tank. So it was pretty bad. But anyway, we got through it. But those are the types of things that I think if you think about the maturity of the industry and the way the industry is heading, those were a lot of DevOps functions. And those DevOps functions weren't what we as an agency or many agencies were set up for. And yet we had to support it because these sites need to be maintained. And then to your point, with Magento getting acquired a number of times, the support was a challenge because once we got to enterprise with these clients, they were paying for support. And yet the folks in support didn't even know how to resolve these types of issues. I mean, these were very, very specific expert level issues. But anyway, you're giving me heartburn now because I'm remembering all these Magento days. Yeah. Good old days.
The thing is, when our industry started, I think everybody just thought that, if the person knew computers, that was good enough. They'll figure it out, right? But I think the specialties over the years have actually increased. Now you have web ops. Web ops is different. Web operations is different from net ops, which has to do with Cisco and networking and stuff like that. You just mentioned a load balancer. I know what that is because I went through that pain myself. And knowing and session failover, things like that, very technical. Now we're getting very tech nerds right now. But the thing is, I think our industry has improved over time. Now it's more feels to me more like Legos, right? and
100%.
there are pieces of it that you just have to know which pieces make sense to invest into, and you're
Yep.
building it. In the beginning of this industry, you had to build a bridge. If Chase was your bank, you had to provide write all the programming to do payment processing with them, and that took like 6 months,
Not
to
to
build.
mention PCI compliance and all of that. But I'll tell you one thing for those who are tuning in, who are into NFTs and Web3. Web3 NFTs feel a lot like e-commerce back in the 2000s, whereby everybody is basically trying to get into it and trying from a service provider standpoint. And yet there are very, very few experts out there. And the reality is everybody's kind of learning at the same time. So there are a lot of issues that are going to occur over the next few years just because the expertise isn't there. But it's a great time to get in and start to understand some of these things. And it's going to adapt, and it's going to evolve much faster than e-com did, precisely for what Sabir was mentioning right now, with all these Lego pieces and the components that are available now that weren't available back then.
And sometimes you're not solving the same problems either, right? How would you have known that we need to, as a society, need to address screen time on our iPhones because our kids are spending too much time on that, and they're lagging in like social skills and other types of things like that. I mean, as human beings, we're learning those things because there are newer problems we're trying to solve also.
100%. And yet at the same time, the core, we hear this question all the time and we talk about it, which is like, has with the pandemic, has consumer behavior changed? Consumer sentiment changed? And the reality is, at the core, it hasn't. It's just they're reacting a certain way to what is happening externally. And yet at the core, humans are humans. Humans want interaction. Humans want human interaction. They want certain things. They need certain things. They don't need certain things. And I think same with business. It's like so many businesses nowadays, especially on the direct to consumer side, over the last few years, they lost sight of what it takes to actually build a proper company, or they built a proper company in a completely different industry, come in this industry, and then now they're not even thinking about building a business the same way. They're not thinking about business fundamentals. But I think we just got to take a step back and look at human behavior fundamentals, things that matter to humans, and then ultimately from a business standpoint, things that matter to businesses. And what makes a business successful at the end of the day is sustainable growth and profit. And yet over the last few years, everybody's kind of forgotten about that because there are other ways to make money. There are other exits. There are other things. But we should go back to fundamentals.
When you get to, I think catastrophes like 2008 meltdown, 2000 NASDAQ meltdown, then 2001 9/11. Now you're talking about 2020 with pandemic hitting us, global pandemic hitting us. Even though we were hit as human beings, we were hit back in 1920 with another pandemic. But the thing is, the environment has changed. The way we address those kind of things. The human beings have not changed, but the environment and how we address things. For example, in 1920, you couldn't have a virtual conference like this, because computers didn't exist at that time.
Totally.
But I think that also with that sort of adversity comes opportunity also. A lot of, if you think about like the business histories of companies that have grown out of necessity, and my company being one of them, actually, and this show, you come up with interesting ways of doing things. Like I don't have to convince people to listen to a podcast. What is it? I think the podcast stats are like 81% of Americans have listened to one podcast at least, right? That's a big, gigantic number. So it's something that and also every grandma knows how to, order for herself food and Uber and stuff like that now. That adoption rate has increased tremendously. Things as a professional I was thinking would happen in 2035 has come down to 2020 now, like 15 years ahead. It's those kinds of things. Now, I just want to bridge the gap here because as you're getting into the years, now I'm playing a role with Gary on the other side of the equation, right? And let me bridge it. So I was not involved. I knew Gary a while back. Then I get this random call. I'm actually helping my client on Long Island with their e-commerce strategy and analytics and stuff like that. It was Canon, the camera company. I get this call and it was Alex Klein actually. I don't know if you did you
Yeah.
meet Alex Klein, right? So it was him. I didn't know who he was. So he goes like, well, there is. I looked up your LinkedIn. You look very interesting. There's an agency that's interested in e-commerce services, and given your experience, I think this is a good connection here. I was like, well, I know agencies, and no agency in their right mind would want to do e-commerce. You know, that's just my experience because I've been in it from the very beginning. Because it's very hands-on work that you have to do, right? He goes like, no, the founder is very interesting, and you may know him, and it's a very small agency. At that time, it was VaynerMedia was about 200 people, roughly 150, 200 people. So he says, well, it's VaynerMedia. I said, you can stop. Gary knows me. Just tell him my name. Say that I would love to meet with him. You know. So I go and meet with him, and he says that he's very interested in creating an e-commerce agency, and he wants to give it a try. And if I'm interested, he would like me to, start it up, build the team, and stuff like that. So I ended my relationship with the client and moved over. I partnered up with him to start building, and in that it was e-commerce services under VaynerMedia, right? Then it got moved to started calling ourselves VCommerce, as in instead of VaynerCommerce, but it was VCommerce. And then in year 3, we starting to not officially branded. We started calling ourselves VaynerCommerce at that time in the very beginning of it. But when I joined Gary, I said to him, like, look, I'm going to do my brain dump, create services around everything that I know, right, about this field. And I know quite a lot. I've been doing it for a long time, since the beginning of ecom. So I'm going to build it. But then there will come a time that I won't be able to continue working it because I'm not an agency guy. I do some strategic consulting, but that's it. That's my extent of client management. That's not me. I like running companies, not agencies. So I think there will come a time that we have to decide that I have to exit, and we need to put the right team in place to continue building out what we have started. And then continue your story.
So right around that time is when, so let's go a few years back. So as this is happening, as Sabir is joining VaynerMedia to run e-commerce at Lucid Fusion, we've now met the folks at Shopify, and they tell us that they're going to launch the Shopify Plus platform, which is for enterprise businesses, and that we would be a good fit from an agency standpoint because we're so multifaceted, because we do design, we do UX, we do strategy, and then ultimately development. And so we're very hesitant to begin with. Same client that I mentioned to you, Oru Kayak, after the whole Magento Shark Tank expenses, they're like, look, we're going to Shopify. They're going to auto scale. We don't need Magento. We're like, no, you need it. And then they basically told us, like, look, we're going to go with or without you. And we said, okay, now that you've given us this ultimatum, let's actually figure out what the Shopify thing is about. So everything was kind of happening at the same time around 2015. And so we looked into Shopify, and our CTO at the time, who's our CTO currently, Ben Fried, looked at it and we're like, look, this is actually much better than we anticipated, because all we thought Shopify was a series of themes. Everybody had the same templated site looking thing. And it's because there were very easy templates to implement. And so people were just implementing the same look and feel. But once we got in, we realized, like, wow, this is actually pretty powerful. There's a lot that we can build on top of this. And so we went all in. At the time, we had business-to-business clients. We had business-to-consumer clients, meaning companies like software companies that were selling to other businesses as our clients. Then we had like a few clients that were selling products like Oru Kayak. But we said, look, we're going to go all in on e-commerce. We looked at Shopify. And what Shopify gave us that we didn't have before was deal flow, meaning if we became a partner with them, when they sold these Shopify Plus deals, they needed agencies to implement them. And so we were one of several, just a handful of agencies at the time that they would recommend. And so they would say, look, you're in this space, talk to these 3 agencies, see which one fits the bill. And our problem in terms of business development and growth at Lucid Fusion was always just the outreach and building a pipeline and all that stuff. We were really good when we were in the room, but what we weren't good at was sourcing these deals. Well, now we had a partner in Shopify who was sourcing these deals for us. All we had to do was just close, which we were pretty good at. So we start closing these deals. We start doing well. One of the folks at Shopify who I believe they call them growth hackers. So they were young, inexperienced salespeople. So they would mostly graduated near Waterloo or in Canada somewhere, and then they would join Shopify, and they would basically sell Shopify Plus. Some of the most brilliant people that I've ever met. They were all in most of them, I'd say they were in their early 20s. Incredible hustle, incredible intelligence. Many of whom that I keep in touch with to this day. One of them was Robbie Deeks. So Robbie Deeks was basically sold the Hundreds, the streetwear brand, on Shopify Plus. Then he introduced us, several other partners, to the Hundreds. We met them, hit it off, got the deal. So we built it. And then around this time, so this is now in 2016, we're working on one of our first big builds, implementing this massive Shopify implementation, which, again, we love doing complex shit. I still think we do to an extent, but like Ben and I just love doing complex stuff. So in this case, they had thousands of blog posts that they wanted to migrate into one Shopify experience so that you go to thehundreds.com, consume their content, and buy their products. So we built a really cool integration with WordPress, built it all, developed it, launched it, and then we were invited by the Shopify team in 2017, May of 2017 specifically, to go up to Waterloo and meet with the growth hackers and the rest of the team and explain the technology that we built, how it could help them, how we sell to enterprise brands, so on and so forth. That trip was one of the best trips I ever took professionally. We went up there, met with them, met with Robbie Deeks, met with a bunch of folks, Zach Wanavar, Steve Vakis-Warren, all these folks at Shopify, Lauren Paddleford, Nabil Fahel, our partner manager, and really like got ingrained within that community within Waterloo. From there, we went back. Robbie and I spent a lot of time together there. Robbie Deeks, brilliant individual. If you ever have a chance to talk to him, look him up on LinkedIn, talk to him. He and I took a trip back from Waterloo. So Waterloo, south of Toronto, up to Toronto. And we spent an hour talking, and we missed our exit to the airport, and we kept talking, and we were talking about e-commerce and basically my vision, now having been in e-commerce for a couple of years, around building this holistic agency that would manage direct-to-consumer brands beyond just technology. And then he was sharing his experience working with these high-growth brands that were going from 0 to 100 million in revenue in 18 months. So we got to talking. Robbie then ended up end of 2017 meeting with Gary Vaynerchuk. He met with Gary, and he talked to Gary about taking essentially the practice that Sabir had built and taking it beyond consulting, and how there's a massive opportunity in, hey, end to end, like let's run media, let's run growth, and then let's build these sites so we can control the entire funnel end to end and not just pieces of it. Gary was on board, Sabir was on board, Robbie joined VaynerMedia to basically handle business development for Sabir's org. Then, and this all happened within a few months, he meets with Gary September. Gary gives him the green light to do this. Then in December, he introduced Gary to me. And so I met Gary. We hit it off pretty quickly. I think Gary, he's got a multitude of talents that we can talk about ad nauseum. But I think one of the things that he is very good at, in my mind, and perhaps one of the best in the world, is being a good judge of character. And so I think within a few minutes, he understands who you are, what motivates you, and kind of puts you in his mind in a certain place. And in that place, for me and for him, it was like, look, what you're doing is interesting. Let's work together for the next whatever period of time and see how it goes. And so then I met Sabir. We started working as Lucid Fusion. We started working with Sabir's team and the VaynerMedia team. They were putting up strategy. They were doing all the strategy work for these brands. And then we started doing the technical implementation on Shopify, together growing these brands. And then over the course of the next 2 years, basically fast forward to end of 2019, Gary and the team and the board approached me about acquiring Lucid Fusion, and then basically fulfilling that conversation that we had, and the conversations that we'd had with Gary and Sabir, and Alan and Robbie, around building this full service agency and really being able to kind of impact brands at a more visceral level, really drive business outcomes, versus what we were doing, which was building technology for them, handing them the keys and letting them run it. What Sabir's team was doing was running strategy, but collectively or individually, we weren't able to really drive those business outcomes that any of us wanted to. And so we decided to come together to be able to do that.
So one question I want to go back, because you were on a roll there. I didn't want to stop you.
Sure.
When you, especially because the thing is, I'm sure that there are a lot of other digital agency owners that are going through it, and especially the technology thing that we talked about, right? When you, I mean, I know that you're having some pain with in that journey. You were having some pain, like you said that it was. I'm giving you indigestion thinking about even Magento at that
Absolutely.
stage. So I can understand the sigh of relief that Shopify is offering you at that time. But as an organization, I know the platforms really well, both of them, both Shopify and Magento, very different, right? Fundamentals are similar, but technology-wise, very different
Absolutely.
platforms, right? How do you take your organization uh, from from Magento to transform to becoming a Shopify shop? I mean, on the surface, yeah, there is partnership, there's collaboration. Shopify is going to help you, but as an organization, I don't know at that stage how many employees were there in Lucid Fusion
At that
when you were
stage,
transitioning.
I mean, when we were transitioning from Magento to Shopify, or basically everything else we did into Shopify, we were probably like 15 to 20 people, somewhere in there. Look, it's a very interesting point, and something that I think hopefully digital agency owners, other business owners can learn from, which is that we had built a certain skill set, right? So think about it. We had a marketing department that enveloped creative. And so these folks were coming up, the client would come to us, we want a new site. They're the ones that would do the strategy, the research, provide new designs and UX and all that. That didn't change much. That changed from the perspective that there are certain things that were fixed in Shopify. So you didn't need to design your own checkout. You didn't need to design certain components that were already pre-built into Shopify. So that team got to be better, got to get really good at those pages that are critical in the funnel. The engineering team was in many ways advanced beyond what you needed to program for Shopify. But that ended up being our sweet spot. And that ended up really distinguishing us in a sense that what you needed in terms of engineering skill set to be able to build in Shopify's markup was called Liquid, to be able to build liquid pages, we had that and then some. And so when we were running into these types of problems, or these challenges rather, where now you need to integrate 1,000 blog posts, now you need to integrate WordPress, now you need to integrate whatever, we basically repurposed the engineering team that we had that were doing other things into building those apps, building those connections, building the middleware and back-end software that many Shopify agency partners didn't have. So what really distinguished us at the end of the day, I mean, everybody talks about our sites look better, this, that, the other, but really what distinguished us was our back-end engineering team that none of these other Shopify partners had, because many of these agencies came out of Shopify, meaning somebody had a two-person shop doing front-end design, and then all of a sudden Shopify launches Plus. They were Shopify experts before, and they're like, look, we're going to take the next step and become a Shopify Plus partner. And so their focus was all front-end, primarily front-end design, and then they added in development. Ours was always engineering, and then we basically bolstered that and ended up going in that direction. Now, in terms of your question about what other people can learn from, certainly pivoting and these sorts of things, it happens. It's necessary. It was necessary for us. It was a survival mechanism for us to continually pivot, to keep Lucid Fusion alive, if you will. And there were times where we had to lay off certain groups of people because, as I mentioned at the onset, in 2005 or 2009, when we're doing a bunch of print ads, well, those print ad folks that are doing copywriting and marketing and design aren't the right people to do digital design, digital UX thinking, etc. And we only learned that the hard way by having them do it, having that design fail, and then realizing that those weren't the right people. We needed to transition to other people who had that expertise. So I think repurposing employees, moving them around, is a really important thing for me personally, to make sure that people, when they enter an environment that I'm in, grow and that they're moving forward. With that being said, it's not necessary to always repurpose them internally. In many cases, when we hired someone and they didn't work out, or we hired someone and our business shifted, we were the ones that would actually help them find another job, another career path for them, because I think we felt like it was our responsibility. We brought them in. So to sum that up, I would say the business needs change, the business changes. It's really important to reassess your employees and your organizational structure on a regular basis and say, is this the best group to move this forward? If not, who can I bolt on? And then ultimately, are those individuals growing? And if not, can they grow internally in a different department? Or let's help them find something else externally that'll help them move on and grow, if you will.
I mean, one of the key differences between Magento and Shopify is the aspect of getting a hosting partner, buying hardware, keep on upgrading it, connecting networks, stuff like that. Those are real, legitimate skill sets. But when you pivot, that means that what played as a net ops or web ops, you may not need it anymore, because all that infrastructure is in the cloud, and Shopify is giving all that to you now. Exactly. You don't have to worry about any of those kinds of things. So that's where, where every one of those people are very talented. That skill set is highly sought after, but it's just not the right mix for you as an organization when you have pivoted.
Precisely. And as we had clients like Sage, the software company, large B2B clients as well that we were supporting from like 2005 to 2015. And for those companies, in a B2B scenario, all we could influence, if we were running marketing campaigns, go-to-market strategies for them, et cetera, all we could measure, if you will, were marketing qualified leads. But we really weren't able to, and nor were most of these companies, really able to determine what campaign activities, creative, et cetera, led to sales and revenue. So what was exciting about e-commerce was that we could actually move the needle for these clients, or get a sense of the impact that we could have for them. And so to your point, what ended up happening, it was a significant mindset shift moving to Shopify, which was all these people that I have that are keeping the lights on are no longer necessary. So what do we do with them? How do we ensure that these people can be repurposed, their roles can be repurposed to add value for our clients and deliver outcomes for them? And I think the most important thing, to your point about agencies, about this, that, the other, is like, make sure that you're delivering value. And if you're not, what is the purpose of that individual who's on that account? Or not even the individual, but it's the role, because you're staffing the roles.
But Zubin, I really liked what you said earlier about investing in people and giving them that opportunity to go out, even independently, to kind of learn this new thing that's coming up. You used the example of NFTs, for example, or crypto or blockchain or anything like that. To a lot of people right now, even 2021, it's a lot of witchery, So was e-commerce too. Nobody would give you their credit card over the internet, was what I was told constantly. And I can show them that that's not true anymore.
Everybody knows that now.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that having that sort of a culture, and especially in a field that we are in, which is a moving target all the time, things that were highly relevant. I can tell you that in 2012, when you were approached about, or 2015, when you were approached about Shopify, at that time the winner of e-commerce carts was Volusion at that time, if you remember that platform. Right? I personally have used it, and I've written articles. There have been articles written about me talking about Volusion and stuff like that. But Shopify did kudos to them. Over the years, they handled the changing tides in business and opportunities and integration and partnerships and stuff like that. That it has turned into this gigantic powerhouse now.
Yeah, I think that when we talk about people and employees, and you think about, for us, for my former partner Zainab and myself, it was all about making sure that we created an environment where people could grow. Now, the the challenge that we had then versus my thinking about it now. Back then, it was like, look, we want to recruit the best talent we can get. Okay, we're in Southern California. Who can we get? And then there was always this fear of attrition. And so you do everything you can to keep that talent there. Once you not once you, but what I've realized, especially over the last coming on 2 years here at VaynerCommerce, we take a completely different approach to that. Our point is not, do not join us because you want to stay here for 10 years. If we do, great. But we are absolutely open to bringing people on board for tours of duty for 2 years, 1 year, etc., knowing upfront what they're going to come, what value they're going to drive, how we're going to increase their market value, and they're going to go. And once you realize that, once you get past the fear of losing great talent, and you start to think about the notion that you can actually build an environment that is constantly bringing in new talent, allowing them to grow, allowing them to graduate, and you've got that entire cycle internally, not everyone's going to leave, but you're whatever 20% that grows and leaves, you embrace it. And by embracing that, you get much better talent, and you get folks that are excited about what they can do for you in that period of time that they're with you, knowing that they're eventually going to leave and they're going to graduate, and that it's pre-planned. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned and overcome over the last 2 years at VaynerCommerce is this notion of, don't fear employees leaving, build an environment where they can grow and that they can essentially leave when they want to, and you're okay with it because you have an entire cycle for them.
I mean, do you want to keep the people? Here's the reverse of that, right? If the people who are staying with you and they're not really that talented, do you really want them staying with you either? If people
100%.
are very talented, even if they can give you 18 to 24 months of their life, their professional career, you had 24 months of that amazing talent being part of your team, and they contributed to the pool of that knowledge, which is tremendous. I would take that any day over somebody who is just coasting for 10 years and not really delivering great value to the company.
Yeah, I'm entirely with you. Look, you need stability. You need foundational level people. You need career people that are with you for a long period of time. We had amazing employees at Lucid Fusion that once we were acquired, we had employees who were with us for 7 years, for 9 years. I think Kelly Rapuano, our director of operations, was with us for, I think, 9 or 10 years. But I appreciate that stability, and I like that stability. At the same time, you can't expect that of everyone. And top performing talent at a certain point in their career wants to grow. And either you give them that environment to grow, or for a long period of time, meaning 5 years, or you understand that they're going to be with you for a short period of time. And that's just the way top talent works. And you embrace it, and you build an environment that you're constantly recruiting, constantly bringing in the cream of the crop.
Now, to kind of fast forward to companies acquired in the middle of pandemic
Yep.
hits you. How has that changed? Because I remember when you were announcing with Gary, I think you guys were in 2 different locations, right? Because we couldn't travel anymore.
Exactly.
It was a severe lockdown. But how has the past, let's say, 18 months of the pandemic affected teamwork and team building while being in this post-acquisition?
So I think that because a large number of people worked in an office together all the time, you had that kind of camaraderie and that gelling to begin with. And then there were the folks that were on your team that essentially came in. So there were a number of people on Sabir's team. There were our team. We all joined as basically VaynerCommerce. I think because of the nature of what we do, primarily digital, right? Only digital. And then the nature of the camaraderie that we had with one another, because we were working with each other prior as well. It wasn't like this just happened. Many of the people that ended up joining VaynerCommerce from VaynerMedia were working with the Lucid Fusion team before. So we already had that like working relationship. I think it was fine. Look, it took us a while to figure it out. I think it took a lot of people. The biggest thing was more work environment at home. And people, many employees, many people didn't have nannies, they had children at home. So I think that was a big challenge. But I think that, like probably most people who've worked from home for a certain period of time. Now, mind you, I had never worked from home ever until like 2018. I would go to the office every single day, even when it was like the three of us. But because I was always about going to the office. Then we worked for a period of time, I think in like 2018, when we were in between offices, and I really enjoyed it because of the focus that I was able to have at home. But I think that we did a great job. Our team did an amazing job of keeping in touch with one another, having video calls as frequently as possible, and making sure that the operations team, essentially the glue of the company, kept everything together, making sure that people were essentially doing what they needed to do, that had the support they needed. That was the biggest thing. But I think ultimately, like everybody else, you end up adapting to that environment. And then you get to a point where you want human interaction, you want real world human interaction now. But I'd be hard pressed to believe anybody wants to go into the office 5 days a week anymore.
I think it would be very hard to even take business meetings, to hop on a flight, to go over and meet someone. They'll go like, why can't we do a Zoom meeting?
100%. 100%.
Yeah. So, Zubin, this has been tremendous. And thank you for taking us through the journey. And this is what I ask every single guest of mine, to give me their number one $100,000 insight. In your case, we have aspiring entrepreneurs or freelancers or digital agency that maybe they're at the very beginning of that Lucid Fusion journey, and they are thinking through building a proper agency and stuff like that. What is your number one $100,000 expert insight into building a company, an agency, and a brand, so that Gary Vaynerchuk can acquire it?
Sabir, the seat feels a lot warmer now. I think this was the whole point of the hot seat, huh? So look, I think that having gone through it myself, having looked at other agencies for potential acquisition, and then just talking to other agency owners, the service industry, the agency industry is difficult. You are constantly after new clients. You are constantly trying to present yourself, position yourself uniquely compared to other agencies, explain to clients why they should work with you. Many times it just comes down to dollars. A lot of times it comes down to relationships. But I think that the most valuable advice I can give, and I'll give it to you in three parts. One, goal setting. So I think that it's really important when you're starting out, even right at the beginning, to do research, understand what you're selling to whom and how, and set some goals for your agency, set some goals for your firm, set some financial goals, set an understanding of this is where we need to be year one, year two, year three, year four, adjust those expectations quarterly. But if you don't have a goal that you're driving towards on a quarterly basis, it makes it very difficult to achieve anything. And then secondarily, you don't even know when to be happy necessarily, because it's not like you set this line in the sand and you've exceeded it. That's part one. Part two, focus. We talked about this earlier. What I was mentioning is like, I had a lot of things going on in my life. I had a lack of focus. And then our agency had a lack of focus. We had B2B clients. We had clients that would show up and ask us about all sorts of stuff. And we were basically chasing the revenue. Wherever the revenue went, we went in that direction. Now, the challenge with that is that what ends up happening is when you get a valuation for your agency or your company or your business, there are certain things that they discount for. They discount for, one, concentration of clients or concentration risk, meaning at the time, in say 2014, 15, we had 2 clients that comprised 70, 80% of our revenue. And so that makes you very risky in terms of an acquisition. And so it drops your valuation significantly. So good concentration risk is important. And then the other thing is, or mitigating concentration risk. And then the other thing that's important is having focus. When we think about an agency or we think about a service provider, yes, you can grow and become this behemoth that does everything for everyone. But if you want to be acquired by a strategic, you have to have some focus. Look at our situation. Sabir and team had built e-commerce offering within VaynerMedia. What we had that they didn't have was engineering expertise. We didn't come in and go, hey, Gary and team, we do everything e-commerce for everyone. And they're like, oh, okay, let's bolt you on. It's like, no, we fit a very specific need that they had, and we had focus. Until we had that focus in 2017 through basically 2018, 19, and 20, we were never an acquisition target. And when we had that focus, it wasn't just Gary Vaynerchuk that was knocking our door. There were several other companies that were interested in acquiring us because of that focus that we had. And then the third piece of advice I'll offer is to really think about what you as the agency owner want and what you're looking for. Because I think that people get burnt out. To Sabir's point, we're talking about Magento. We're talking about all of these nights that we were up and the sites were failing and we're trying to get them going before Shark Tank and all of that. And I think it's really important to understand what you want as the person leading the agency, you as the entrepreneur. And I think you have to design that for yourself and think about, as I mentioned, like the business outcomes that you're looking for. Think about what you want. Do you want to build something and do you want to take a step back and be the chairman and build an amazing team that can run it? Or do you want to run it day to day? You have to be honest with yourself. Once you figure that out, then you know who to hire. Then you know that, look, I'm going to do this for the next 3 years. I'm going to lead this company, but I'm going to make sure the first few people that I hire and I invest in are an executive talent, people that I'm going to learn from and people who can take this thing that I'm building and grow it. Or do you always want to be the boss, in which case you hire entry-level people, junior-level people, then mid-level people, and then senior, because ultimately you want your vision to be implemented all the time. So I would say those 3 things. 1, understand the goals of the company, what the company should be achieving. 2, understand and focus, create incredible focus. There's so many agencies out there that have been acquired for massive multiples, and they're doing millions of dollars in revenue that only do email marketing. All they do is design emails and deploy emails, which many agencies out there do, but they would never focus on that because they think it's too small. It's not too small. Focus. And 3rd, know what it is that you want out of your life and make sure that this business that you're building, whether it's an agency, it's a direct-to-consumer business, anything, can support you in getting to what it is that you're looking to achieve.
Zubin, well said. Thank you very much for being a guest on the show and sharing your journey and your wisdom with our audience. And thank you, audience, for tuning in. If you are catching it live, thank you 1,000 times. If you are catching it in a recording, that's perfectly fine too. And I really appreciate all of you and much love. Thank you, Zubin.
Thank you, Sabir. You're the best. Good to see you.